Okay, so this is your standard monopoly diagram, or like standard cost and revenue diagram. We want to be able to discuss probably four things when we're talking about market structures. So one of them is allocative efficiency. One of them is productive efficiency. Another is dynamic efficiency. Another is, this one's less important, but X inefficiency. Like, not less important, but less common to talk about. And then finally, contestability. So basically, whenever we're talking about any market structures, it's important that we're able to use the right terms at the right times to describe the effects on consumers and the market as a whole. So let's take this oligopoly or monopoly outcome where the firm's a profit maximizer in the long run, and just try to explain whether or not there are any of these efficiencies and what the impact of that is. So the allocative efficiency, that happens when MC equals AR. Now, that's very easy to forget. So what I want you to do is remember allocative efficiency happens when supply equals demand. You wouldn't necessarily write that, but you would remember that, and then you would never forget that it's MC equals AR, because as you know, AR is the demand curve, and
Yeah,
then MC is like close enough to the supply curve because it's the one that's upward sloping, right?
yeah, yeah.
So yes, MC does equal AR here, but that's not the point. The point is, if we go down, are we producing this much quantity? No, we're not, right? So therefore, is this monopoly allocatively efficient?
No.
No, because the price is far too high and the quantity is far too low, right? And we would
Mhm.
see this in collusive oligopolies and in monopolies because firms like Apple would set a really high price. So that means that the output is also lower. Not everybody is able to afford and therefore access iPads, AirPods, MacBooks, and iPhones, even though if they were able to access them, it would, at a lower price, there would be an increase in consumer surplus. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Cool. So therefore, allocative efficiency refers to whether or not consumer surplus is as high as it possibly can, as high as it possibly can be in a market. Yeah.
yeah,
What is this? Okay. Does that make sense on allocative efficiency?
yeah.
Perfect. Um, the next one then is productive efficiency. Productive efficiency always happens when MC equals AC. Again, not that easy to remember, very easy to muddle up. So I just want you to remember productive efficiency happens at the bottom of the average cost curve. So
Yeah.
AC is minimized. So if we look at the bottom of the average cost curve, that's always where MC cuts it. If we go down, are we producing at that quantity? No, we're not. Again, quantity is too low. And our current costs are actually up here. We're not down there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, depending on if a firm is or isn't productively efficient, you could explain it slightly differently. But the general idea is that average costs are not minimized And a bit more detail is that if it's in the long run, this doesn't apply in the short run, but in the long run, it would also mean that economies of scale are fully being exploited. So therefore, the monopoly is not fully exploiting their economies of scale. Therefore, they're not all the way at the bottom of their average cost curve. Therefore, costs aren't as low as they possibly can be. Therefore, they're unable to pass down lower prices to consumers. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. And why are they not there? Well, they're not there because they're profit maximizers and they have price making power. Therefore, they can fulfill their own objective. They don't care about any of these efficiencies. They don't care if they're allocatively efficient or productively efficient. Only consumers care. They're happy making their profit by setting a higher price and a lower output. Make sense?
Yep.
Perfect. Dynamic efficiency. This happens when a firm makes, we don't need any more equations now, firm makes supernormal profit in the long run. It's quite important to say in the long run because when you revise perfect competition and monopolistic competition, you'll realize that they make supernormal profits in the short run.
Yeah.
But in the short run, you might make a lot of profit for one day, but then new firms will enter and you won't be able to make profit, supernormal profit the next day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be you make profit for 1 week and then 1 week later there's no more supernormal profit to be made. Now, that's not good enough because it means that you don't have consistent profits, therefore, you can't plan consistent reinvestment. On the other hand, Apple make this much supernormal profit, and this is in the long run. Therefore, Apple are able to reinvest and improve their iPhones every year. For example, they have Face ID. They didn't have that before. Or for example, they reinvested into their headphones and now they have AirPods. Okay. Monopolies or collusive oligopolies are probably the ones that are most likely, or maybe the only ones that can achieve dynamic efficiency, and possibly normal oligopolies, but no competitive market can be dynamically efficient. So that's the benefit of the high prices and the high profit. There's also a chance that firms don't necessarily reinvest. They could just pay their shareholders, but that's if it's maybe a natural monopoly or a monopoly that literally has no competition or no incentive at all.
Yeah.
Cool. X inefficiency, that's a bit of a random one. It's when a firm, their average cost is not even as low as it could be. For example, if that's their actual average cost, or if that's their average cost, but the average cost could have been here if they tried a bit harder. So that average cost curve is possible, but they're not that low. That's just because they couldn't care to minimize the average cost. At every single level of output, it's just a bit higher than it can be.
Okay.
This happens with nationalized companies because the government own it and the government aren't profit maximizers, so there's a lack of incentive. And it also happens with natural monopolies because they're not only monopolies, but Apple have some competition from Samsung and so on. Natural monopolies have no competition at all. They're like the gas companies and water companies and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And then finally, contestability. That's another way of measuring or weighing up or judging a market structure. Contestability in the market structure means that there are low barriers to entry. It does not mean there's competition, but it means that there's a threat of competition at any point in time. Low barriers to entry and a threat of hit and run competition. That's what happens in perfect competition and monopolistic competition. It's when you start off like that. You start off like that. New
Yeah.
firms enter the market and you end up like that. So all the profits are going to be washed away. But contestability is just the threat of, am I able to make supernormal profits in the long run, or will that incentivize and allow new firms to enter the market? Okay. So it kind of prevents firms from exploiting consumers.
Right.